first of all, Dr. Groves, I'd like to congratulate you on the award that the Census won last.
Oh, the Ogilvy Award. Yeah, this was really cool. I had very little to do with this, so I can share in the joy of it without boasting. I think this was an odd campaign if you think about it. There are very few target markets that is everyone. And that was our target market. We wanted to measure every resident of the United States, and this was a gigantic coalition of agencies and federal government folks that worked real hard, so we're real pleased about it.
But this outreach is part of a new dimension of the census being more aggressive in spreading the word, obviously, and reaching increasingly diverse audiences. Maybe we can, now that I have control over the screen, maybe you can take us a little bit through the history of this.
Yeah, this is cool. Look at the upper left there. Does anyone remember what those devices were? We actually have a 7-track tape drive at the Census Bureau just for legacy data. This is a pretty young audience. Few people know that. And notice how well-dressed the people are, too. I think that's changed, too. But we've changed as the country's changed and technology has changed. We have this little intermediate medium of a CD and a DVD, but basically almost everything that we're pushing out now is on the web, and we're actually tweeting social data, believe it or not.
And that's going to continue in the next census as well, I gather?
Absolutely. So my challenge to the folks who are disseminating data really is to make sure that we are a presence on every platform that exists. So we have a little team that's doing apps on everything we can possibly find around the world.
Will people be able to do the next census on Facebook?
Don't know about that. I guess there's an implicit assumption that Facebook will exist in 2020. I'm not sure that will be true. It might be something else by then.
Can I friend the census?
You can indeed. We have over 100,000 friends on Facebook. I must admit, many of them are our own employees. Not sure that counts. You know, we hired 600,000 people to knock on 47 million doors. This is an interesting little pyramid, a language pyramid. At the very top, look at the pinnacle there. We had census forms in 6 different languages, English, Chinese, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese. That gets you, according, admittedly, to our own data, to about 97.8% of the residents of the US. Then we advertised in 28 different languages. And we had language assistance guides in 59 different languages. These were little devices to help you fill out the English form if you couldn't read English. But that doesn't take you to 100%. So they say that in the LA school systems, there are 137 languages spoken by the kids. I believe that. There was a wonderful New York Times article a few months ago that claims there are 600 languages spoken in this city. Some of them only by one person. So I'm not sure what that means when a language is spoken by only one person, what that actually means. But we are a multilingual society, and if your target market is everyone, and you think they can be reached in English only, you are deceiving yourselves. So we spent a lot of time on language last year.
Well, I think it's revealing and interesting that to measure an increasingly multicultural population, you had to devise a census enumeration that was itself very multicultural. The staffing, language.
Absolutely. On our advertising, we spent $300 to $400 million in advertising, and this was your money, by the way, as I am repeatedly reminded these days. The way we thought through that from a business viewpoint was that if we could increase the mail return rate by 1 percentage point, we'd save $85 million of knocking on doors. So it was a pretty easy business case to spend that much money because the gains we can document, I think, are way beyond the 5 or so percentage points that we need to pay it off. So we had to do that with this pyramid in mind. A lot of our advertising, most of our advertising was using local media. A lot of our advertising was in language. There are a lot of bi-weekly in-language papers around the country that are passed from one person to another, and they were a great set of media for us to reach those populations that can't be reached really with normal English media.
And yet, if I remember right, it wasn't any particular ethnic or racial group that turned out to be hard to reach. It was an age segment, right?
Yeah, this is really funny. We had a daily monitoring device of how the advertising campaign was going, the normal demographic breakdowns. They were guided by the traditional groups that are hard to enumerate. And then we broke things by age, and that was the shocker. All of our metrics on whether the message about the census coming and whether they intended to respond to the census suggested that the 18 to 24-year-olds were just out of it. They weren't getting the message. They didn't know what the census was about. They didn't intend to participate. So we, in almost real time, mounted these focus groups around the country and talked to these kids, and they said, "Oh, I thought this was for adults. Isn't this for my parents? Why do we have to do this? This is an old person's thing." And if you think about that age group, we'll have it every 10 years. These are people who last decade were with their parents. They were at home. Their parents filled out the form, and they've never really thought about the census as something that they're part of. So we dumped in a ton of digital media buys about that time and brought it back a little, but it is a focused target for us going forward. It's a group that needs to be informed about the utility of quantitative information for their own lives, I think.
What was the line you guys came up with? As fast as your girlfriend?
Yeah,
Was it?
I'm not sure I should say this in public, but
Oh, they can take it.
there was a contest among the public relations student associations around the country, campus by campus. They had national awards for the best census advertising. So every once in a while, these would come into my office and they'd say, what should we do about this stuff? And one was, I think, an Indiana college, and the poster read, easier than your girlfriend, faster than your boyfriend, the census 2010, fill it out.
And it only takes 6 minutes, right?
It only takes. And then another one said, safer than sex, the 2010 census. So sex was a selling device on campuses for the census. It seemed to gather attention of all people.
Now, speaking of great taglines, this truly is, I think, one of my favorite I've heard. We've become a nation of numbers. This was Dr. Groves who told me this not long ago. And in a way, I feel like you anticipated everything from James Glick's new book to the perception that really these numbers are transformative, represent much more than just a numerical count of who is where, but really starting to shape identity, the way we see ourselves as a country, the way we see even the very definition of American. Meanwhile, one of the reasons Dr. Groves is here is, the census has not been appreciated, I think, underappreciated. I think you agree. And one of the ideas behind this, rationales, is that the census itself represents so much value that is not measurable in the strictest sense. And as a result, there's been some criticism of saying it's too intrusive, but that's not really getting the point, is it?
Well, it is something that the central government asks us to do. It is an intrusion in some sense of the word. But our lives are filled with such kind of moments. So the real critical question is the trade-off between the minor intrusion in your life of filling out this little form and the value of the information to the society and the economy. Is that a good trade-off? And last year we were all about the intrusion part, if you think about it. This year we're all about the giving back of the information. And it's telling a story that this group probably knew because you're data savvy and you're watching the country as it evolves. But a lot of us don't know this stuff. And I still, even to me, the kind of numbers that are coming out are surprising with regard to the rate and magnitude of the changes that are going to have implications going forward. So we are a nation of numbers. None of us like to be a number ourselves. But this group and research in general, won the war, I think, about how do we make decisions. We really do need quantitative information to make decisions that have long-lasting value, I think, and we're part of that.
Well, and there's, it was Ted Poe, a congressman from Texas, who said, well, he said a lot of things, but one of them was the census should stick to counting people, which, it was not even an indirect attack on the American Community Survey, which measures a lot of things besides that, right? Housing, education, a lot of the details that people in this room depend on to help them market and drive business. So, I don't think you can really...
This is going to be a new decade for this industry, I hope. For the very first time in the country, we will be putting out annually small area data about occupational distribution, educational attainment, commuting patterns, a lot of socioeconomic, a lot of housing data. Every year, areas as small communities, groups of blocks in New York City, you'll have new estimates. This has never happened before. In prior years, the Census Bureau would give you a big dose of data once every 10 years, and you'd feed off of that. It became less and less valuable in targeting as each year passed. Well, we've repaired that. This repair is called the American Community Survey, and we just, for the first time, achieved this, it's kind of a cumulative survey, 3 million households a year, providing pretty small data. So there are two things that have happened, right? The 2010 census data are going to tell us that we are a massively changed country in terms of multiculturalism. And we have this device that we can track the change in the population at small areas in order to target in ways we couldn't target before. So I think this is a neat combo, and your industry, as well as other industries, can use it. There's a great story that came out of Houston last week of a business development planner in Houston. Houston was competing with Brazil for a plant location, a Japanese plant. They assembled data from the American Community Survey, won the plant based on data, and that's only because we have this annual device now. So I think we're all learning how to use this new data source, but it's a great tool for all of us going forward.
Dr. Groves is too modest to say it, but I think everybody in this room needs to understand how important this is, that it goes beyond Americans taking the census for granted, but there are people who actually are, in our government, taking steps to try to stop this kind of information being gathered and shared for everybody. So to me, that's like saying, let's all move forward together into the future with our eyes closed. And I think it's something we all should think about, and I'm sure there'll be many ways we can help to spread the word, including what we're doing right now. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the interesting highlights of the numbers that have come out so far. By the way, there will be a press release. There's stuff going on tomorrow and later this week.
This is sort of a big week for us. We're finishing the delivery of all the initial data for redistricting purposes Thursday. So New York will get its data Thursday. And it's from that's sort of the launching pad of a whole bunch of reports that will come out. You'll see stories about the characteristics of the country, both spatially and sociodemographically, that'll be insightful, I think.
So let's get into some of these. Obviously, one of the big takeaways is the aging population.
Now, look at the x-axis first on this. So this involves some population projection stuff from 1960 to 2050. We haven't measured 2050 yet, but we have great demographers at Census. This, by the way, looks a lot like a lot of the developed societies. They are aging societies. This has gigantic implications for the nature of life in general, the problems facing the society, the products and services that are needed by the society. Notice that there's a flattening here that occurs, and this flattening has to do with other things happening in the population. So the native population is indeed aging at a pretty rapid rate. The in-migrants to the population are disproportionately younger and have much higher fertility rates. So this gradually flattens over the coming decades. The assumptions, as you know from these kind of forecasts, are that the immigration patterns, the fertility patterns remain roughly the same as are going on now. And if that changes, these forecasts aren't very good, but these are pretty stable phenomena.
I think it is really important to understand that this is a mirror of what's happening globally. If you saw a chart of the growth of populations in developing nations versus Latin America, Africa, and Asia, you'd see all the growth coming from the other parts of the world, not the developing world. So this is a big change. It's going to continue, and within the country, let's go.
Yeah, let me help you through this map.
Yeah.
We're going to show you change over time. Notice up at the top right the year. The dark color, this is a county map. There are about 3,000 counties in the country. The dark counties are those with 20% or more elderly. And we're going to take you through the last decade, year by year. So kind of focus on everything. You're going to see not much change in the geographical dispersion. Those of you who have geographical target markets don't have to change much. But we're all getting older. So just we're up to 2003 now. This is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We haven't released the 10 data yet. So the story about the older population in the United States is that it's growing, and it's growing proportionate spatially to where it was before. There's no massive migration going on among the elderly population, although as I age, 65 and older isn't exactly elderly yet, so we have to raise that somewhat.
Well, and that's really one of the biggest takeaways for marketers and advertisers is boomers will not act like older people have in the past. They have different expectations, they have different habits. Look, one thing I've noticed is, the big rock concert festivals, you can get $1,000 air-conditioned tents now. We're talking about things that used to be completely ruled by teenagers in shorts and flip-flops. That's a sure sign, rising ticket prices for concerts. Older boomers refuse to stop doing the things they like, and this has massive implications for how they spend money and how we reach out to them. Let's keep going with here's another.
So this now goes way back. This is an age pyramid, as we were all taught. So the width, males are on the left, females are on the right. The width of the bars for a particular age group are a function of the percent of the population. The baby boomers in 1970 is that bulge at the bottom. So they were young teenagers then, and we're going to take you through 80. You can see them age. 90, they're coming up. 2000. Now notice what's already happening in 2000. Mainly through, we're getting the children of the baby boomers at the bottom. Um, uh, and we're getting in-migration with higher fertility rates. And then I think we probably stop at that. Do we go?
Also, old women, 85, the gender gap grows, right? Over 85.
Absolutely. I mean, we've always had this early deaths of males that's actually changing gradually. But you see the predominance of women in the older age. Now, this is harder to look at, but cooler, I think. So these are projections. There are three figures here. Look at the dark green, and that's 2010, the age structure. You can see the boomers around the 60s. And then project forward to 2030, and you can see them. No, go back. You can see in the light green how they've aged. And then 2050 is this gray thing. The gray thing is bigger. We're a bigger population in 2050. And the age distribution has changed. The baby boomers are through. They're gone. We are a different population. That cohort has passed through the population. And we're going to be a different country at that point.
And here's where the really serious part of this comes in, I think, is the dependency rates and what that means for...
Yeah, so what do we mean by this? The dependency rate is a rate that's been tracked by some people. It's a combination of those who are dependent because they're too young to live on their own, and those who are dependent because they may be older and need the assistance of their children. There are a lot of different definitions. This particular one is less than 20 on the low end. That's the green, or that's the green, and then 65 or older on the upper end. And you can see we're going to go through a decade with pretty massive change in this phenomenon. We're going to go through 2 decades, and then we flatten out. This will be an issue for those who are interested in selling services or products, either to the groups who are dependent or to the other group not here that's taking care of these 2 groups. We have to realize that we're going to go through changes over the next several years, and that'll be a moving picture. I go back to, this is the kind of thing you need to track much more carefully and in a much more timely fashion than once every 10 years. We ought to be watching this a little more carefully. And it's going to be varying by geographical market, too. This will be a phenomenon that will be clustered spatially.
And this is tied, of course, to the evolution of the family altogether. This is another...
Yeah, this is sort of a baby boomer thing. This is people working longer, although we cut it at 55 here. This is a fairly dramatic change in a small amount of time, if you think about it. Now, we cheated a little on the y-axis. It doesn't start at 0, it starts at 33. So we have a movement from about 35% in the labor force up to about 39%. Part of this is the effect of the recession, we think, right? People are hanging on to jobs because their pensions took a big hit. How long they hang on their jobs is a very important phenomenon, both for all of us who are either holding on to a job or want the job of the person who's holding on to the job, but also in terms of what it means for products and services of the retirees versus those who are active in the labor force.
I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit, but this is all related to really another important thing, the evolution of the family. And of course, we have a couple of slides on this, but again, the majority of the growth in households with children is going to come from Hispanic and multicultural populations for the foreseeable future. This has enormous implications for anybody who's targeting youth, families, products that go to people with children. It's a massive shift, and if there was ever an imperative to get your ducks in a row for multicultural populations, if you're in a business that's anywhere related to these things, the time is now.
So these are pretty large differences here. So this is by race, ethnicity, and the top one was the Hispanic in blue. These are, think about the consumer household now. The implication of those fertility rate differences are Hispanic households have kids at a much higher rate than other households, and thinking about how to target advertising has to take that into account, I think. This is a different sort of thing. This is a recession curve here. So these are the average number of people in a household, and we got hit big time during the housing crisis with households getting doubled up. How long this is going to last is very interesting. Right?
And return to nesters, I would think, would be part of this, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry?
Return to nesters.
Part of that is that going on. So we chose a few cities. Phoenix, LA, and Las Vegas were chosen purposefully because the foreclosure problem hit big time there. I don't know if you've been to these cities, but there are a lot of vacancies, a lot of houses for sale. Phoenix is the red curve here. These look like small changes, but if you move from about 2.5 to 3 persons per household on average, what that means is there's a lot of doubling up going on. Doubled up households may be temporary phenomena or not. We don't know this, so we'll have to see.
So you have young people maybe delaying moving away. You have people moving in with relatives because they may have lost their house. And then you have the growth of multicultural families that tend to have more children than other groups, right? So all these things, there's a confluence, I think.
Absolutely. We don't know enough about consumer decision-making, I think, in those doubled-up households. Do they behave as one consumer unit? Are they 2 consumer units? How do they split up the finances and product decisions, I think?
I haven't seen any other research on this. It's definitely something to think about. Now, new mainstream, I've talked a lot about this in the past. I hope by now everybody is aware of the importance of what we're talking about, marketing and being able to speak to disparate multicultural populations that increasingly includes also non-Hispanic whites who are themselves multicultural by affinity, by choice, by inclination. But here's some really strong numbers. You're going to see a lot more of this coming out this week. Start with this one. This is a historic high, is that right?
This is a fantastic chart, I think. I'm not sure how many people know this. So look at the line first, which is the percent of the population that was born outside of the U.S. We are at a level now that's higher than anything since the 1920s. Most of us have gone through life in that trough over the years where there was a decline. This is a different country with regard to this attribute than it was for many of us, and it's continuing to change. Ignoring this fact, I think, allows or threatens a lot of bad decision making. These folks, we know from the census alone, see the U.S. and the U.S. culture through another lens. Many of them, they see the U.S. and our customs through the lens of their old country as well as the new country, and understanding that and understanding the socialization process of these groups, we really have to do to target well, I think, because these numbers are big enough that they can't be ignored now.
But the other thing to remember about this is that when you look at the new numbers for Hispanics, under 18 Hispanics, overwhelmingly are native-born and bilingual. Certainly 75% of them speak English. And then I think for over 18, it's about 50-50. So what's coming behind this is a wave of Hispanics who are younger, who are bicultural, who are comfortable with English, and who are born here. And that's really, that's why you see Spanish language media suddenly say, well, we're not really a Spanish language network, because they see this coming. And that's why you see everybody else scrambling to figure out who these people are and how they interact with media, products, services, and so forth. I'm going to go real fast through these. But
So
maybe you can talk
look
a
at different things here. This is the Hispanic population, and sort of look in the middle of the country. This is a different story. This is fantastic growth, but also geographical dispersion. So let's just pop through the decade, and you can see the country sort of filling up on this phenomenon. This is a big story out of the 2010 census, along with others. So the new immigrant population has spread throughout the entire country. There's a huge Burmese population in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Who would have guessed? I spent hours with the Somali community in Minneapolis. We are ethnically diverse, and that is dispersed. This is Asian. Same sort of phenomenon, although keep your eye on the west part of the country. You can see sort of the buildup over the decade on the west.
Here they come, yo. Here they come. Here they come. This or that. This or that. This or that.
Come on, who's the black sheep? What's a black sheep? Know not who I am or when I'm coming, so you sleep. Wasn't in my realm or wasn't in your sphere. Knew not who I was, blessed in here. The choice is yours.
You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you get with this, cause this is kind of fat.
Come on, where's no black sheep? Here's a black sheep. Even if we wanted to, the clock cannot be weak. Watch me swing like this. Why should I swing it like that? Because in fact, or me it might not attract.
This, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you get with this, cause this is where it's at. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you get with this, cause this is kind of fat. Do, da, dippity.
That was not produced by the Census Bureau. I want to point that out.
But it's relevant because what I want to know is what's the latest numbers on the hamster population?
We don't count hamsters. Although, you know, I did a lot of visits to schools to encourage kids to talk up the census with their parents. And one kid in second grade said, "Can I count my cat?" And I said, "No, you can't count the cat."
But you know, of course, the reason I wanted to show that is this was new mainstream advertising, contextual advertising with, you know, multicultural elements. Humongous success for Kia. They had over 1.5 million views on YouTube. Sales for Kia surged by 45%, and there was a whole series of commercials. I'm sure we've all seen some of those. So it's a quick example of where this is all headed, how you guys are starting to actually act on it. Let's talk about this slide quickly, and then we'll.
Yeah, this
we'll
is
wrap
different. This will be a story you'll see over and over. The dark areas are counties that experienced growth in minority population. This is sort of like a donut. In the middle of the donut is Atlanta City. And you're going to see stories like this throughout the country. The suburbanization of the minority population is a phenomenon of last decade, and this has unknown implications about whether the suburbs will change or whether these minority populations going to the suburbs will be changed by the suburbs. This will be a great question to observe over this decade. And Atlanta's a pretty dramatic case, but there are other cities that look just like this.
So this advent of a multicultural suburbia, it's new, it's big, and we're going to be hearing more about that. One more piece of this is enormous growth, still small in absolute numbers, but high growth in people who are identifying with more than one race or ethnicity. Again, there's a halo effect. The implications of this are huge. It represents particularly younger people, how they employ media, how they see themselves. If you look at the history of identity, you know, we talked about a melting pot, and then it was a salad bowl. Well, now I think it's kind of turned into a parfait, because people really now have, you know, overlapping identities that they switch back and forth at will. Contextually in different places at certain times. They will go back and forth. And then once again, as Dr. Groves was saying, you know, the diaspora of where these kinds of things is happening is kind of amazing, right? We're looking at.
So these are growth rates of the percent of people who checked multiple race boxes on the form. These are these are 30 to 60% growth rates. The states that don't have a growth rate, the x-axis, are those that weren't released at the time we made this up. My hunch is these are great focus group people. They are, in addition to being, most of them are biracial, by identity, they are bicultural by identity also. They should be good translators between cultures because they live in two cultures, many of them at the same time. And they should be wise informants, I think, about how cultures would react to different products or services.
Right, and we'll point the way towards this fusion of ethnicities,
I think so.
identities,
Yeah,
and
it's a great group to watch.
I think we have time for a couple of questions. Yes, sir.
I think we got a mic coming your way.
All right, thank you. Especially on this last point, to what extent does the change of the census categories and definitions that they offer in the questionnaire affect how we can interpret these trends?
Yeah.
For
great
example, on the
question.
racial question and household composition.
Well, this is a long story, but we know they affect that. We also know that this is a self-identity question, so other events can affect it. I remind us that between 1970 and 1980, the proportion of people in the U.S. who identified themselves as American Indians grew so large, way beyond any possible explanation through fertility, and there weren't very many American Indians immigrating into the country. This was a self-identity thing. It became attractive for personal benefit to identify yourself as an American Indian. So all of this has an effect. This is self-identity, and the cues in the response categories affect these numbers. Absolutely, absolutely.
Anyone else? We answered everybody's questions about America? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, there's somebody back there.
Get that man a mic.
Hello. My question becomes, with so much multiracial prevalence going on, when a person is able to check a couple of boxes in terms of what race they belong to, where do you count them? How do you count them? Where do you put them? Because we start looking at statistics saying one race versus another. How do you do that?
Well, for those of us who actually analyze data, this is not good news because, believe it or not, over the summer, we'll give out data that categorize all possible combinations of these. So there are, I'm guessing on this, I think there are 123 categories of race combinations that we picked up. Some people choose 3 races. So we dutifully report those. You're free to collapse in any way you wish on that. And we report the data separately by those who check one race alone or one race in combination. So it's made our lives as researchers a little more complicated, I admit, but it's a faithful representation of what people chose.
I think that's it.
There's one.
One last one.
Thank you. Can you comment on the trend of overall people, whether they're migrating to the suburbs, or is there some cities where people are migrating back to the cities?
Yeah, it's a little early on that, and there is, the best way to say this is, there is heterogeneity across cities. There are some cities regenerating their urban cores. It has become trendy to live there. You see especially couples moving back into the urban core, into renovated areas. That's not true of all cities, though. So this is a city-by-city phenomenon.
Thank you, Dr. Rose.
Great to see you.
Thank you, Bob, the ARF.
Thank you.